It's two conscious guys talking, where conscious male leaders come together and have a discussion that is deep, that is nourishing, that allows us to see the illumination of consciousness that's unfolding progressively for men that are waking up in the world, and where you can get insights on your own awakening as a man, and also for amazing women that want to learn more about men's challenges and struggles that have created some of the dysfunction we've seen within men in its society, often called, quote unquote, the patriarchy and other terms. What created it? What is the genesis of it all? What can we do about it today to empower men to be all that they're meant to be and to support the awakening of consciousness for men and women and all? So George, this is great being with you. We're just starting to chat it up here as we're getting to connect here today. And you're about to say some really cool things, I could tell. So I was like, okay, let's just get this process rolling here. All right.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with what I'm up to with interviewing guys or talking with, other conscious guys. And I was just talking about what we were going to be exploring today. You're about to get into something. And I was like, oh, let's make sure we capture that. So tell me what, given what this project's about, that we're here helping to expose like the things that men do deal with. It's a conversation maybe it isn't that prevalent, like the stereotypes that we deal with and the pressures of that, and how have we dealt with those, and embracing our feminine side too, which is usually for most of our backgrounds wasn't something that was really something that we're told to do very much. So and all those sorts of things. So yeah, anything you'd like to share about your journey today, that's fair game. So or about the topic in general to get started. You're about to say something, so I want to hear what you got to say about what's come up for you around this topic. Yeah.
Well, let's just sort of go back to the beginning, like when I look back at my life, like, oh, everything has been here as a pattern to serve me to sort of evolve, but I had to really involve myself first. And so when I think of those two words, evolve and involve, I think of, two words I recently came across. Of course, we've all heard of evolution. And to me, evolution is like what you see outside of yourself. And it's sort of like what we put in place as like a masculine, energy, with this ability to create, and yet from that, I had this word come up from, I was talking about involution, and involution to me is like, it's that place of like being for the, ideas to come from, so how do we move to the creation of something from being, Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. Most people are trying to do that. It's like, you can't really do being the change. You have to actually, experience it, but within an individual person in the patterning that is bringing them to this point. So let me go back to when I was 5 years old. I was asked, or say I was told not to ask questions, just do it my way by my dad. And I was also told by teachers that I asked too many questions, and I was called question mark. And so there was this part of me that was like sad, and like, I repressed like myself and became a conformist. And at 10 years old, I entered into a church that said that there was only one right way. And so there was this sort of belief that I had to conform to, that this person came to this earth to save humanity. And it's like, whoa, is that the truth? I didn't really get it until, and I sort of followed that path, was made to read the book of Proverbs every day, which has like 30, chapters in it. There's some of these things I'm really grateful for. Like I say, I feel like everything is happening. Everything happens for a reason. but it's later in life when we get to look at it from with an equanimous view that we really get to see that, wow, look at that right there. Like, it made me who I am today. Like, I love my story, and yet that's not the norm, but when I finally, got into this place of quieting the mind, which I call the mind, and the ability to say, hey, shut up, you're not good enough. I call that the masculine energy, and I call look at what is this animal teaching me, or what is, this uh, me breathing, taking deep breaths into my body, and me nourishing my body and feed. That's, to me, I call that the feminine energy. So I feel like when you're, practicing, what most new, I guess you say, new thought or new agers call, self-care, that's really about where it's at, because that's the being, that's nourishing the beingness of me, to allow the story that I've been telling myself to unfold, and to make it so that it creates this straight and narrow path for me to not go too far to, listening to what this is saying, because this has been programmed by the doers, and I call it other people's garbage. And when I can create the coherence between the two by finding the balance in those, that's when, I find my own individuated straight and narrow. So how many paths are there? As many people as there are on the planet. It's finding that coherence, that balance between the masculine and feminine, that make the paths so beautiful.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was a big, big, big
yeah.
piece.
You're like me. You like to jump around a little bit too. I like that. So it's fun. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I love that you talked about growing up, and I ran into it at different times in my life, but yeah, I definitely, like in grad school and stuff, I was a person like, yeah, or even as a kid, like you're arguing too much. And then in grad school it was, you're coming to all of us asking all these same questions. Like, what are you doing? Are you trying to cause trouble? Like
Yeah.
troublemaker asking questions, like,
Yeah.
okay, listen, I mean, just having a conversation. I always said that, like, I'm not trying to argue with anybody. I'm not trying to make anybody wrong, or try to upset people. I'm just let's have a conversation. Let's examine things a bit more. So I love you brought that part up. I totally had that experience, and the religious aspect of, you can see the gift in it now, right? Like, wow, well, that was actually really helped me. Like, I can see the beauty perhaps of some of the things that were being shared, but also saw the non-truths in it for me. And I appreciate that as well. So, getting back though to like the journey of, the messages you got about being, you talked about the masculine and the feminine, but what messages did you feel you got about being, hey, you got to be a man kind of thing? Like, I don't know exactly how old you are. I'm like, what, 52 at the time of us doing this, but be a man was still in the consciousness when I was growing up. You got to be a man, no emotions, got to be tough, you got to be responsible, you got to take care of your family, you got to be the one, you got to save the day, and all that. I mean, what kind of stereotypes or things did you get hit with, when you were growing up, that just never really felt like they resonate for me? Like, I wasn't into cars and all this stuff. Like, I was kind of into it, but not really, like, let's play war, sure, I did some of it, but not really, I wasn't really into it. And so I'm just kind of wondering, as a conscious guy, like, most of us were sort of pretty conscious even as kids, that kind of wondering what that path was like for you.
Yeah. So what happened to me when I was about 17, 18 years old, like, I wanted to go to like dances and be part of the crowd. And actually I was even like, the coaches wanted me to play football, and my mom didn't want me to. She's like, I'll pay you not to play football, because I would come home with bruises all up and down my arms. And I'm like, you know what? Football really isn't my thing. I'm gonna, like, I really liked to sing, believe it or not, I was a singer. And so I was actually in drama club, but I also found a way to meet, girls, and stuff like that. So it was sort of, neat that I still had that attraction to women, but I still had that, desire to act and sing. So I was in drama. I was the president of the band. I was in all the musical, select choruses and had a good voice. So I was voted most musical in high school, and I was also voted class clown. It was just sort of neat because I look back at that and like, oh, how can I use that now in my life? And believe it or not, at the time of this recording, I'm 52 years old too, or 52 years young, whatever you want to say.
Mhm.
So here's what happened. My dad, because I wanted to like go to the dances and be part of school, and I was in a regular public high school, although I did go through 2 years of like a Christian type school. High school, I went to public. And um, he got mad at me. We had words or whatever happened, and he grabbed this featherweight canoe paddle. And he like went to swing at me. I stuck my hand behind me. Like I was 17 years old at the time. And he broke it over my wrist, but he did not break my wrist, thank God. But I ran away from home, and when my mom begged me to come back, and 2 weeks later I finally came home, but I joined the Navy, to get away from my dad in that like, control and force. And little did I know what I was really doing was submitting myself to more control and force and dominance of time and space. And it's like, whoa, did I really need to learn some lessons in this lifetime to get it? And so what happened was, of course, in the Navy, it's all about, all about guys that are horny on a ship, pretty much. And it's like, but it was something about that where I didn't go down, like, since my mom that paid me not to play football, like I would get into it a little bit and hear, because that's all that guys talk about. They're playing games, or they're football to me was never like something I really like took on as like, ooh, that's my team. And most of the time, if it was that is my team, it's because the person I was in relationship with, that was their team. So it was the sort of the ingrained like, thing that was going through me was conformity, conforming to what somebody else said, in that whole time frame where, I was in that, like I call it the matrix programming, go to school, get a job, get good grades, then go get a job, and then, find a woman to get married to and have children, and then, work, like in a pattern of just paycheck to paycheck until you finally just, okay, retirement. It's like your eyes are on retirement. It's like, it's such a program that this societal program is sort of running, that you have to really push through that, with your own like force and your own like ability to rebel, and like this inner revolution has to like arise, and when you feel that something isn't right. So here's what happened to me. I did get married, to a preacher's daughter. I had 3 children. The first one was my namesake. All right, so it was a boy. And after 10 years of being in marriage and having 3 children, my parents had handed me, they sort of started shifting their consciousness a little bit, because they were sort of like, they would go with whatever was coming at them, and they would just listen to like Kenneth Copeland. These are like different names of preachers and stuff like that. But then they had someone give them Conversations with God, a cassette tape back in the day, in the late 90s. And that Conversations with God, I had 30 minutes to drive back and forth to work. So my partner, she didn't know that I was listening to these tapes. Sort of like my parents sort of undermined, the relationship, which there was like a dynamic in there where she did at one time think that my parents were trying to, like they were trying to manipulate me into believing that their way or whatever it was, or energy or whatever it was right. And so she was like, oh, we can't be in your parents. And so for 1 year, I didn't see my parents or hear from my parents, and just happened to run back into them because we went out to eat and they were in the same restaurant. Gave my mom a big hug, and somehow in the next few months, this happened, the Conversations with God tapes. Listening to those, a couple months later, had a Bible study in my house. And at the end of the Bible study, had like 12 people there. The preacher says, does anybody have any questions? And this is what happened inside me. I thought, well, yeah, I do. I said, what happens to the Buddhist and the Hindus when they die? And he said, because of their selfish pride, they're going to burn in hell. And there was something in me that said, that is so not right. But I didn't say anything. I was quiet. Just inside me, I felt like I stood up, and I was like ready to look everywhere else outside myself for the truth. And yet there was, I also felt in my solar plexus, like I didn't even know what it was at the time, but it's like I felt like a karate chop punch, so it's like, what is, and I went on a journey from there. I went to soul, body, mind, and soul expos looking for a guru, had someone that was all dressed up in white teach me like how to meditate. I paid him like $40, go to his house or whatever. He turned me on to raw food, vegan. And I did that for 14 years, but in the process also found Kundalini yoga, and I did a big, yoga, philosophy and deep dive into yoga, and looked at that as possibly being a way. But the way that I was conditioned was that I was thinking that whatever I found was the right way. So I was like dogmatic at whatever I did. I was dogmatic at, vegan and raw food. I was dogmatic at, Kundalini yoga, and, almost went into like being a Sikh and all that stuff. And so when I finally, sort of let that go, it was only like 4 or 5 years ago when I came across the Gene Keys is something that I'm really passionate about. And it's all about the Chinese I Ching, which is called the Book of Changes. But it's like this modern day version where each key or each hexagram has a shadow, a gift, and a city. So it's like the low frequency, the middle frequency, and then the higher essence of being. And so when you look at it and you filter your life experience through it, you like get the patterns that you need to embrace that are called shadows. So it's like, and then you can see, oh, the gold nuggets or the diamonds in the rough of everything that's happened to you, so that you can use that to step up into and use to take or make the right choices and the right steps in a more mindful approach to life as you unlearn everything that has basically been imprinted on your conscious or your masculine archetype. So that's right. A big one right there, I know, but I hope I sort of answered the question in that long-winded.
Yeah, we did definitely touched on it for 100%. Yeah, I mean, with your dad, I wanted to go back to that. Like, so everything he was. So based on what you said, you said he was about all his control and force, kind of. So he's like kind of stereotypical, like, you got to dominate kind of male kind of energy. It sounds like anyway. I don't know, yeah. But yeah. So yeah, and then let's go to the Navy to escape all that. I thought that was very interesting. So, but yeah, I mean, so you were shown like things are a certain way, we do it like this, and it was very masculine, and it is what was dominating the field. And it sounds like your mom was a supportive, nurturing force. Maybe, I don't know, it sounds that way. I'm not sure, but it sounds like there was a certain amount of, at least you got some of that nurturing, little softer energy, it feels like, from her, at least, right? So
yeah, I did. And an interesting thing is I did also recognize though the patterns of control, and I guess, and control can sometimes lead into manipulation by, various things. As I was riding with her
Mhm.
to, I rode up to Virginia with her last week, and then I rode back down. And as I was talking to somebody in the back seat, because I was a backseat rider at this time, I was telling them about gene keys and this particular gene key that was coming through, and she was just like hearing little bits of it. And then she said, well, how can you, like, you use all those big words and, like, this stuff, and blah blah blah. I said, I'm just trying to help you, like, make it more relatable, and stuff like that. And I'm like, wait a second, where is this going? Like, this is my own contemplation. And one of the things that I realized from the perspective of learning how to feel what is right for me is to listen to listen to, but not necessarily take advice
Mm.
from parents, teachers, preachers, and anybody, because you have to really feel it. Those are like the tests. Those are the tests are like, oh, thank you for that pattern that showed itself in the bringing me to this point in my life. Thank you, mom. Because I know that the biggest programs are usually between 0 and 7, 8 and 15, and 15 and 21. There's like that, the 0 to 7 is like how I'm loved and how I'm taught to love myself. The 8 to 15 or 8 to 14 is how are my emotions, or how am I interacting from this, bigger place. And then from, 15 to 21 is like, how am I putting this all together, and how am I able to create from this place? But that's, sort of a big ask in that time, because your hormones are coming online. You're trying to make sense of the world. And it's sometimes not until like you're my age and your age, that you really, get that bigger picture, and like, that's why that happened. So that I could be the light and be the change that I need to be right now in the world.
Right.
So
Mhm. Right, right. So it sounds like either way though that you had a lot of controlling dogmatic energy in the household growing up and around you. So that's what I'm getting, the vibe I'm getting from you, from what you
yeah,
said. But
yeah.
what were you taught? Like, you didn't, I don't know if you said directly, said anything about this. What were you told, like, or what impressions did you get of, like, hey, this is what it means to be a man? You've got to be like this, or you got to be like that as a man. Like, you recall like indirect or direct messages around that?
Yeah. Hmm. Thinking back to those times like in the Navy, it's like this is, sort of like that. This is how we do this. This is what we do. We always make sure that this has happened. Everything's got to be perfect. I remember, like feeling like I did my best, in a certain area or something on, on the ship, because I was on a ship and I was like in charge of maintenance. And then you'd have like this lieutenant that would come around like with a light glove or with a white glove, and he'd be like pointing out all these little details that you like didn't even, like, it was there, but it was like, oh my god, like you're really being super nitpicky. And it's like, if that's what it's like to be a man, I don't want, or to be that type of person, I don't want nothing to do with it.
Mhm.
It's sort of like that's the feeling that I had. And it's like it created like this, I don't know, this rebel in me that was like, oh. And another thing that happened for me, just going fast forward, is when I married the mother of my children is a preacher. And when he started to say that, basically everything that he would say was like, you need to do it this way, or need to do it my way, basically. So all the things that he would create for people were basically advice based on what he thought was right for them to do. Like, and if you didn't do it, then basically you're sort of in the doghouse over here, or you're not going to heaven, or you're gonna, sort of feel your own pain. And this is um what happened in that situation is that my oldest just turned 33 years old, and he turned transgender and decided to become a she. And I just had a talk with her last Sunday. It was one of the most healing talks that I've ever had, because it allowed me to see the pattern and the balance of how we can approach life. And her and I were going back and forth. And she then told me, she said, you know, Dad, I changed my name to Savannah, but I kept my middle name out of respect for you and Poppy. That's my dad, which is my namesake, same name. So it was really interesting to have that. And I said, but when this actually happened, this was actually 2 years ago when she decided to do this. And I just fully supported her, but I also looked at the patterns that came from, I didn't even take it on like something I did was wrong, but I did look at what happened in her life that created this, sort of spin out of the masculine and feminine forces. And I saw the dominance of the of her grandfather as being sort of that issue, because I just talked to one of my other daughters, my youngest daughter, and when I left their mother, I had this idea that I wanted to give them a different way of looking at life. And all three of them, my daughters, are totally unique. They can see that, oh, it's all about being kind rather than right. And so this perception that arose came from the youngest daughter seeing that they were talking to her grandfather about giving up his guns. Like he had over 200 guns in every corner, and yet he's like in his last days of his life, and he'll never give up his guns. He's like from Texas. And so there's these concepts. Texas, we do it bigger, we do it better. These like rah rah rah, and it's like, blue. I just pull right back from it, and I was like, I don't want, as much as this man is like in trying to control this whole situation, I don't want nothing to do with it. And I've basically, it's it's been one of those things like, oh, I want to be in relationship with people like that's the grandfather of, that's the of my siblings, of my siblings, of my daughters, and I thought about this the other day. I thought, well, I might never see him again, but I want to be there to support, my daughters if he does pass away, but it was just interesting to hear all three daughters have their own individual take on what is happening and all the patterns that have sort of, been in place to create their destinations and their outcomes in life.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So what I got is like, I just keep hearing like a lot of with the being the man stuff. It's interesting. Like, I guess if somebody asked me about that question too, maybe there was a time when I would not even have had an answer, perhaps, of what because I didn't get a direct message, but we get so many indirect messages through countless movies, TV shows, just what's said about men all the time and everything. And
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is your thing, it seems like, was between maybe some level of compliance, but also constantly internally a sense of rebellion, and then outward rebellion, then ultimately, but class clown and all that stuff, right? It's funny, like, I mean, I wasn't a major class clown, but I definitely got into some of that stuff at the times too. So like, yeah, screw you all, I'll be the class clown. So yeah, our way of kind of trying to break out of the mold, we felt we were being put into, right? Like, okay, no, I can do what I want, let me do whatever I want in class. Yeah, okay, you don't like it, whatever. That whole thing, right? Because so much BS. I ought to be able to be a class clown, do what I want,
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I can remember though, some of the crazy things I would do. Like I would chew up balls of paper and throw them at the at the blackboard, and crazy stuff. But it's funny how I look back and see that thread, of everything. But anyway.
Yeah. So everybody has their own way. Yours was like kind of navigating compliance versus totally rebelling, is what it sounds like, at least. Like I've got the two paths, and you kind of straddled both paths. It's often it sounds like, and then eventually it's like, okay, I'm finding my own way in this life, finding my own truth, right? Like, I
Yeah.
love that about like don't take advice from others. Like I could come here and either way, but like let's say I told you, Jordan, I'm like, listen, hey, here's what you need to know. Boom, 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 boom. Even if it like 90% of it resonated, you shouldn't just take it like, oh, what kind of resonate? I'll go with what he says, right? You should
Yeah.
your own truth, right? Like I just as a person, I mean, much less as a man, but like just as a person, like I love that you so in this conversation of what's it mean to be a man kind of thing. Well, it means whatever the hell you decide it means, I guess, if anything, at the end of the day, right? We get
Yeah.
to decide for our own self, from our own sense of truth. That's how I hear it, how I'm hearing it. So
Yeah, you are exactly right. I feel like I have, sort of this, we have this sort of stereotype of, we need to be in one relationship, with another person. And yet when we find this balance and we have a partner that has that balance, it's like, it's not like like I used to have this play. I used to be in relationships where, like, oh, if you talk to another person, another girl, oh, you want to sleep with her, and it's like, no, I don't. What do So it's like this. There was that stereotype, and so now I have conversations with so many people as a life coach or as a guide, so to speak. And it's about, to me, it's about showing them how, basically how to expand their heart and accept themselves and all their stories, and sort of share the stories of how I've done the same. And it's, Daniel, it's been so expansive that some of the people, some of the women that I talk to say, you are the best. You are like they're in love with me, but I'm like, look, but I've got this romantic partner. This is my partner. I said, but I also realize this, that once one has found the balance, or what I call sacred union within themselves, then all of life really becomes or steps into this sacred union, and the right people start to show up in your life, and someone just recently said that we have 144 soulmates on the planet, and it's like, well, I don't know if that's true or not, but so I look at life like it's a mystery, but I have to, embrace my story and disregard his story to allow the mystery to unfold. So that's, sort of my little way of, like,
right.
looking at it. And for me, I use animals a lot to sort of like say, oh, that's just teaching me to embrace this, that's teaching me, or what was I thinking when I seen that, and how.
Right. Right. Yeah, that is fascinating. What life's constantly speaking to us, and we're constantly like, okay, what is this trying to tell me, and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to talk about the thing you mentioned with like, okay, well, if you're around this woman a lot, then you probably want to have sex with her or whatever, like these stereotypes. Like that's what guys are after, just after sex. And there's definitely a drive in men, right? So it makes sense that maybe where that comes from. It's not out of nowhere, but
Yeah.
the idea, like immediately, this is the idea, right? It is an interesting pattern. The other thing I thought was interesting is you saying, and men like ourselves to do transformational work with other people, that we work with a lot of women, a lot of us, and you do have some women that may have experiences of like like, wow, like they have these feelings towards you or whatever, and it happens to women, I'm sure, all the time with men, right? But like it happens to us too. I've had women stalking me that I'd never even worked with directly, but were following me, like
Mm.
and they had all kinds of interesting ideas about what was happening between us. I'm like, oh, wow, it hasn't happened a lot, but here and there, these different things have emerged, and but it's just, hey, it's just it can come up. but so, and I've also, I've also actually as I've also had women I feel be inappropriate with me. I'm sure I probably I've been inappropriate. Okay, I'm no judgment, but like been inappropriate with me, said things, made me feel uncomfortable, touched me in certain ways and whatnot. And it's tough because it's hard to know how to handle that stuff sometimes. In this space, it's like, okay, don't want to make a big deal of it. Then again, it did bother me. What do I do if some of these people are your friends, even, right? Your colleagues or friends, and it puts you in a very awkward position. And then as a man, wow, to feel like you got violated or something like that feels weird too. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that us guys are dealing with, working in this space, for sure, like different things we could be accused of, and whatnot. So yeah, it can be, for me anyway, it's been kind of unnerving at times, but mostly I just love working with women. And I've grown to love to work with men more, so I used to have some walls up around that. But yeah, it's but yeah, there are some challenges. It's a matter of but it's a matter of like what's going on with your own consciousness at the end of the day anyway, right? Like, okay, so if this is coming to me, this is happening, I can trace every single one of the situations back to something that happened earlier in my life. Oh, that happened there too. And then it's still up there. It's still here for healing and for me to work through it and move through it, whatever it is that comes up, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of the things that I realized that once I really got a grasp of how these patterns of masculine and feminine are moving in me, and they're sort of like, doing the yin and yang thing, the yin yang. And it's like, how has it come together? It actually was something where I started to see into other people that would show up in front of me, their patterning. And not that I wanted to like, tell them, oh, this is what's happening or whatever. But if they did come to me for advice, I would try to guide them in a way that made sense to them, by, what I call, a level of intimacy. So I was like, into me, I see you, and it's like that really started to become the norm. But I didn't really feel like I actually almost created like a guidance package where into me, I see you guidance, and it's like, no, people don't want that. They don't want to be, know that you can see them. But that's really on a sort of a bigger picture level. The more that one grows, the more they see all. And they have the empathy. For the empathy to me is like, you see the person in their shit. You just have to leave them in that until they basically hit their own bottom, because it's so unique. And if they come to you for guidance, it's because you shined your light brighter. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's true too, right? We see people that have stuff going on, we'd like to help them, but they have to be, people have to be ready for that help, that's for sure. So the masculine's way, you need help, let me help you, let me.
Yes.
I used to do that. I actually got into that at times in the past. There are people like, I help people with doing what you're saying, like seeing into people and doing energy scanning and all that stuff. And like, I'll be like, you can do this, and you're a healer, and you were meant to do it. It's your destiny. You got to do it. And I remember one lady a long time ago told me, yeah, you might be right, but it's my choice. Now back off. Like, and she was right though. I'm like, you're right. It is your choice. Like, who am I to say you've got to do your destiny? You better get going. It's like, I had to learn to back off, come out a little too strong sometimes. So
yeah. Well, I love it when a woman is basically found her balance and they have to use their masculine energy to like say, hey, there's a boundary here. So that's what really I find is the masculine energy is for creating strong boundaries, and the feminine energy is for embracing and allowing those boundaries to actually be seen where they need to, where the masculine needs to sort of come back and create that boundary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The feminine kind of pointing to where the masculine is really desired and needed, right? That's kind of
Yeah,
how.
exactly. Exactly. It's almost like this voice within yourself that's like showing you, okay, this is, and it's sort of like what I call, I guess it's like sort of like the divinity code within each human being. Once they really achieve this level of mastery, and then they start to realize, oh, this world and this life is really a playground. No
Yeah.
matter what's going on out there, because you can create from that, and people are going to start to rise up, and it's going to reinvent the entire way that we're doing business or doing anything on the planet.
Right. Right. I mean, I don't know about other people, but like, yeah, sometimes with like the news, like lately, it's like, I've gone through periods where I wouldn't listen to the news for a very, very long time, a year or more or whatever. Like just wouldn't listen to the news. I'd hear it from other people. Don't want it in my consciousness. Then I get into the news maybe again or whatever. But with something like the news, because their job is to make it as dramatic as possible to captivate you. I mean, it's very obvious, this headline just in, oh my God, this happened, whatever it is, it could be
Yes.
something that actually is dramatic, or it could be something like, oh my God, did you see today this person like said something mean to another person? That cannot be tolerated anywhere ever again. We need to talk about this 24/7 till the end of time, until everybody's like, yeah, oh my God, yeah, whatever it is. So it could be really serious. It could be not that serious. And yet we'll take it as serious because we're giving our consciousness over, whether it's the news or whatever, so many different places, we give our consciousness over to it. And after a while, you start to, as you deepen your awakening, right? You become the observer of it. And you're just like, oh yeah, it's just all that noise again, right? It's something much more true and real that they're not even touching,
Yeah. You know who my favorite newscaster is? JP Sears.
Oh
He's
yeah, I watch him.
my
Yeah.
favorite newscaster, because he really puts it into perspective from a way that's like, oh, I didn't really see that in the news, but I see it now, because it's like, the news is sometimes you don't even know, from my own like personal like opinion, you don't even know if it's true.
Right.
Like, I don't know that that it wasn't premeditated, that
Right.
Will Smith got up and slapped the crap out of Chris Rock, and he comes back around like nothing really ever happened. You know what I mean? It's like you look at that scenario and you're like, oh. And so JP Sears really put it into perspective, and then I'm like, okay, so that's really how I get my my news, is by some thread of like grace that is like pulling itself through my desires, to see something show up in my life. I feel like life is really like a bucket of synchronicities.
Yeah.
We just have to be aware, of every moment. And to me, the purpose of being human is to be present to every moment. But to be present, we have to find the balance between the masculine and feminine energies. So it's like the be here now effect.
Right. So what do you feel? So tell me more as we're starting to wrap up a little bit. What do you feel, the gene keys has been part of it and whatnot, but what do you feel like was like, we kind of talked about it earlier, but what do you think are like some of the most important things that have helped you to find that balance between, this is how I read you a little bit. I'm just reading you minorly here, but like my sense is that, historically, you could go more passive and just be like, okay, I'll just go along with it, right? Or you get in your rebel mode and then you feel that and that's stirring, you're mad inside about it, and then you might act out in different ways. Or you're like, screw that, I'm going this way, forget all of you, right? So how did you find more of your own center where you weren't as pulled by all that stuff, like all those other like ways of coping and dealing with the situations? You talked about some of it, but I'd love to learn more about that so it can help other people.
Yeah. Specifically, I would say some of the deepest learnings come from when I would probably just go off on my own and go out maybe on walks in nature. And I would just sort of look at nature and like, see the squirrels like playing and chasing each other, and so a lot of times, um I remember, I remember when I was growing up camping a lot, and I think that that's really sort of the thread, that held, the balance in my life was always the desire to go back to, water or nature, or looking at the leaves change, or and then, starting to get this glimpse of like everything is so beautiful, but I have to allow myself to be present in order for it to sort of expose itself, and when that happens is sort of like it's almost like I have to give myself on purpose. I have to like give myself what a lot of people might call their prayer closet or their intentional space for the day to actually activate this, I don't know, this mystery of quantumness. It's like, because I call that the quantumness. It's like, how do we activate that code within us? Well, we have, for me, it's about using my voice. Like I'll chant, I'll say like om or something like that. And I'll think about, all of a sudden I think about like Indians and how they use their, so I'll just play with, seriously, I'll go in a corner and like play with myself. And then sometimes I'll get really loud thinking, who's listening to me? And I'm like, it doesn't matter, and so I really have to push through this. This is the one thing that I think was one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life just recently is Wayne Dyer said, disregard the good and bad opinions of other people. And in order for me to like show up in the last couple of years, I really had to feel like I needed to push past that and just continue to show up no matter what. And so if I was like contemplating something or whatever, then I wanted to find people that were doing a similar thing, right? That were doing something similar to what I was doing. And so I would go and I would show up and then I would listen to what they were saying and feel like, oh, there's a story in my head that I need to talk about, and I would like, oh, should I get up there and talk or should I just sit back and listen? And I found that, like being a church type person, the people that didn't want to like deal with life were the ones that would sit in the back row and just wait for, the chicken to be done in the oven and get out of there, or whatever it was. And yet there's the other people like me lately that put themselves in places where they can basically stand up, and push themselves into the discomfort of using their voice or whatever, and not being scared to mess up because who cares? I feel like I'm the only, so I had this perspective come through, like I'm the only one that needs to be healed. When I show up and I use my voice and I share my story, then there's something about that I'm accepting about myself that creates healing, not just in me, but in the stories of everybody else that's hearing me at that time. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's the feeling that I get, that something's happening in the quantum reality when that happens. And so that's sort of like me going into the prayer closet, so to speak, but then coming back out with this bigger picture.
Right.
And then this self-acceptance piece, putting myself into like-minded crowds of people that are contemplating similar things.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. Like, so you're able to claim your own power and authority rather than listening to what other people are just they're random, kind of random opinions and based on their own wounding and everything else, right? So
Yeah.
So not being swayed by that, but coming back into your own sovereignty and realize that I don't need to, get their approval. I don't need to heal them. I just want to work with me. I want to just, that's what it is. And so I wrote that down. That's probably the most powerful thing you said the whole time. It's not brand new, but it's like something that's so powerful. You said, I'm the only one to be, it needs to be healed.
Yeah.
And I've always said that too. Like I've always, but I have to constantly remind myself of these things too, though. So, but like I always said, like when I started really thriving and doing my work in the world with healing and everything else, it's when I realized like this is really just about me loving myself every single moment. Like when I'm doing that really well, everything goes really well, but if I'm thinking, oh my God, I might get it wrong, like that, which comes up frequently in my, I'm willing to be vulnerable about it. I can say, oh, I never think that way, which would be, somewhat true, but like it's an energetic pattern. I feel like, oh my God, I better get this interview right. I better get my mind's already thinking, I got a client after this. I better get that right. And then whatever, gotta get it right. Like, but it's more so like, am I going to show up to the moment fully, loving myself, just wonderfully loving myself as best I know how in that moment, and letting things unfold and just trusting, and that's where the magic is. I mean, and that healing grace, right? That's where the magic is, and that definitely will balance the masculine and the feminine, in my opinion, as well. So definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting too, because I feel like when I'm in that space that you're describing, what needs to flow through my consciousness to be expressed is automatic. It's almost like we become channels of the present moment. And it's the most beautiful thing. But it's the balance, obviously, between masculine and feminine, because we found it within ourselves that allows that water, like, our words to become like water.
Yeah, totally. Well, I really super appreciate this. This has been awesome, really awesome, being with you today and having this conversation, and touching on some of the direct stuff with being a man and masculine programs and stuff, and programming overall, and so many different things. So I appreciate it so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for sharing with us today, George.
Yeah, you're welcome. And blessings to all. It's my word, blessings.
Blessings for all. I love that. Okay, thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you for listening in to Just Two Conscious Guys Talking, where our mission is to impact millions of men ultimately to deepen their awakening by examining their consciousness of what's been unfolding for them with male stereotypes and programming that has allowed them to have opportunities to evolve during these times. It's an exciting time to bring more love to men and women around the world, and we are grateful for you tuning in today. Feel free to share this episode and keep tuning in, and also look in the show notes for a link to get notifications of future episodes. Until the next time, everyone, goodbye for now.